Welcome to Ponchatoula Live, the show where we make it easy for you to connect with the people of Ponchatoula. I'm your host, Parker Layrisson, and today I've got a fantastic guest. I've been so excited about this interview all week because the person that I'm going to interview today has really been one of my heroes my entire life. Now, he's not just a hero because he's a United States military veteran, although he is. He's an Air Force veteran of the Cold War, but he's also a legendary local journalist. And more than any of that, just a great guy. He and his wife have given more to our community than practically anyone I know through volunteerism, local philanthropy, and just, getting up and doing good things and being good people every day. So with no further ado, I bring to you Mr. Vic Couvilion. Mr. Vic, welcome to the show.
Good to be here today, Parker.
Well, I'm very glad you made it. I know you're busy. Why don't we kick things off with you telling our viewers and our listeners a little bit about yourself?
When I talk about myself, like I'm sure so many others do, I also have to talk about my parents, and here's why. Before my father started school, he couldn't even speak English. He spoke only Cajun French, what people now call Cajun French. And my mother was from the same background. She was a Couvillion. So I proudly state that I am a 100% Louisiana French. I won't use any of those derogatory names.
Well, I love it.
Now, it really makes me angry. I mention that because to me, and I must also say that history, especially local history, is one of my passions. That we should appreciate our forebears. We should appreciate where we come from. And I could do an entire program on that, and I could say some things that might make some of the people that wrote grammar school history books angry, but that's another story.
But that's the kind of good facts I like, the spicy ones.
I want to briefly say this about my father. His father died when he was only 12 years old. He grew up, he had 4 brothers, one of whom was born with polio, crippled for the rest of his life, on a very small farm in a Voss Parish, Louisiana, outside a little community called Ponchatoula. He, in the famous high water of 1927, forced them out of their home for months at a time. They came back to nothing. All the livestock was dead. Everything was gone. Everything was lost. Their old house they finally managed to clean up, made a crop somewhat the next year. Then in 1929, they were getting ready to pick cotton. They were thinking things might get better. They had borrowed a little money. The stock market crashed. And they were told, plow your cotton underneath, nobody's buying cotton. And they like to starve to death. If it hadn't been for turtles and crawfish in season and squirrels and rabbits, and they grew corn, of course, but they somehow survived. Then they did it without any help. It's not even speaking. So when they were living away from the flood, they were sent people to help them who couldn't speak French, and they couldn't anyway. From that, I learned a lesson that stayed with me all my life, that you never complain, you tolerate whatever conditions come to you your way. And even though he only had a 6th grade education in a 1-room country schoolhouse, my mother never worked, they raised 6 of us. All of us had successful lives, and that defined who I am to this day. So that's why I start the story there. Now, to get more immediate.
Well, can I ask you one quick clarification on that? So first, thank you for sharing that, because, I hear in that origin story so much that kind of resembles things that I've heard in my own family. My dad lost his father at a very young age, and I've heard so much about how that can impact the family. But I thought you mentioned your family coming from a Voiles parish, and I thought you were a St. Landry Parish guy from Eunice. So could you just clarify your origin story? I know you're talking about your forebears, but we kind of if you can tell me where y'all came from, this French family that we're talking about.
It's probably a circuitous route how I wound up in Eunice, and I'll tell you about that.
Okay.
Excuse me. Going back to my father, when he was about 17 years old, he said he knew that there wasn't much hope on the farm. An older brother had gone to New Orleans so he could send a few dollars back. He told me one time he had to walk a mile to his uncle's house to borrow 2 cents for his mama to write a letter. But anyway,
Whoa. Yeah.
When he was 17 years old, he said he parked a mule in the barn and he went and told his mother his cousin had joined the CCCs. That was the Civilian Conservation Corps. They did wonderful work. To this day, the things they did building parks, dams, forests, and all that. And my mother's family had been from Ponchatoula too, but they had moved to Alexandria about 15 years earlier. So when he came to the CCC camp in Alexandria, he had an uncle living there, and he said, my mama told me that they used to have some neighbors called the Couvillions. Do you know them? His uncle said, I sure do. He said, I'll take you to visit them next Sunday. He said he walked in the house. They spoke French too, of course. And he saw my mother sitting there, and he winked at her twice, and she winked back. And that's why I'm here today. But I grew up in Alexandria.
Okay.
And I thought I wanted to be a priest. So after the 8th grade, I entered Maryhill Seminary. It was the Alexandria Diocesan Seminary in Tioga. And I spent the next 5 years there until I realized I did not have the vocation. And this is one thing that life is full of, to me, things that happen that you don't know they're going to happen, but it's something I might talk about a bit more. But anyway, I was with some friends goofing off. I was 18, 19 years old. And a man named Idris Laborde, who was managing editor of the Alexandria Daily Town Talk, walked in the room and he said, he also grew up speaking French, of course. In fact, he had a French radio news show. He said, Victor, what you gonna major in now that you're gonna go to college? I said, English. I said, I like writing poetry. I love reading. Reading has been an obsession all my life. And they said, what you gonna do with that English? I said, write the great American novel. He said, well, while you're starving to death, have you thought about journalism? Before, it never crossed my mind. They wouldn't let us look at newspapers in the seminary. A couple of weeks later, I get to Northwestern in Natchitoches, and they said, what are you going to major in? I said, journalism. And I was blessed. The first journalism class appropriately named Introduction to Journalism was by Dr. John Merrill. He was brilliant. And I knew from that moment on, this is what I was going to be in life. So this chance remark by Idris Laborde, who ironically later I worked for him, but that's another story. Anyway, I majored in journalism. And in fact, by my last year there, I started working part-time for the Natchitoches Enterprise. Ultimately, I had a former roommate who was trying to start a little newspaper in a town called Slayton, Texas. It was just.
But you're going to have to help me out, Mr. Vic. I have no idea where Slayton, Texas is. Can you help our?
Few people do. It was about 15 miles north of Lubbock.
Okay.
This is how I would describe it. I briefly had a summer girlfriend, and her daddy told me, there ain't nothing between here and the Rocky Mountains but some barbed wire. And the wind blew constantly. It never rained. The wind blew constantly. They would have dust storms. You could stare at this. Anyway.
Yeah. That's about as opposite as you can get from here.
I know. Well, I always say I spent a year in Slayton, Texas in 3 months. But anyway, I came back, and that's when I went to work. I needed a job, so I went to work for the Eunice News. And
okay, so that's how you ended up in Eunice.
That's how I ended up in Eunice.
Okay.
Up until then, Alexandria had been my home.
Well, the reason I asked is I thought I was going to make this really neat connection. I've got a dear friend who's a federal judge named Daryl Papillon. He's from Eunice, and like your family, his family spoke Cajun French, and we handled tons of cases together. But what I thought you were going to love besides the Eunice connection was the fact that his son is a young journalist. He was the editor-in-chief and sports writer for the Tulane Hullabaloo. And that young man named Jude Papillon was the producer of this show. He's now in law school. But my little attempt to connect the dots here has fallen apart a little bit. But there's at least an attenuated, y'all passed through the same city, maybe at different times, but interesting. So Eunice, are you a beat writer? I want
to say this. For $75 a week, I wrote news, straight news, feature stories, sports. I covered St. Edmunds High School, Eunice High School, every sport there was. And I wrote the headlines, designed the pages, and even it was a lead press shop, one of the old shops where we had linotype operators. I would go back in the back shop. We were also a job shop, and I would sit down and do my own headlines in lead. I learned how to build pages upside down and backwards, loving it. I really did. Good
You
people,
got to do it all.
great food, good community.
Can I ask you what may be a silly or stupid question, but in a community like that with a lot of Cajun speaking or French speaking folks, is the paper always 100% in English, or do they ever do anything to target the folks that speak French as a primary language? How does that work in those old communities?
Well, no, they strictly had, it was all English. We didn't even attempt to do that. I don't know how much time. Well, quick story though. One time an old man came in the front and wanted to buy a classified ad, and he spoke no English. And the girl up front who would take the ads kept saying, she said, "I can't talk to this man. Would you come talk to him?"
You're the interpreter.
I went out there and I said, "Qu'est-ce que tu veux, non? What do you want?" Uncle, he goes, "Mon cabri va faire la mode." My goat wants to make love. Literally, he wanted to buy an ad because his goat was its stud. That's what it was.
No. Oh my gosh.
But anyway, there were a lot of people that did speak French around there, so it kind of helped me. One more quick story.
You tell as many quick stories as you want, because I'm loving them. I don't get this every week. This is not my average guest, so please go for it.
I was single, and I was renting one room from this lady, Mrs. Manuel. She barely spoke English either. But anyway, I walked in this bar to drink a beer, and there were two old men sitting there, and they were speaking French. And I went down to the end of the bar, and when I'm asking, I said, "Qu'est-ce que who is this young man here?" And I heard him say in French, he said, "I don't know who he is, but I think he's a Yankee." So I walked out, I went behind him, I said, "Comment ça va? Non, je parle français." He said, "Man, you speak French?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Alexandria." He looked at his friend, he goes, "I told you he was a Yankee." 35 miles away, but I was a Yankee. But anyway.
Hey, but I guess you didn't have I-10 yet, maybe, but you were above I-10. That's the standard.
That's right. You're right. And then came the second one of those coincidences in life. And this is a life story that I'd like the young people listening. Don't ever think that everything's going to be the same for the rest of your life, that nothing's going to change. You're going to do exactly what you want.
Right.
Because one day I got a letter. This was in 1963. Instructing me that I had to report to the custom house in New Orleans to be processed for possible drafting into the Army. Sure enough, there was a busload of us left from Opelousas, and I'll never describe to anybody in good company what it's like to spend a day in a custom house undergoing military. Anyway, I thought I'd failed because I was real skinny then. I weighed about 130 pounds, but anyway.
So you thought you might fail the physical?
That's all right. So I wasn't worried about it. I'm going to be here in units right back again.
Yeah.
5 days later, I got a letter to report for duty in the Army.
Oh, whoa. They moved quick in drafting you back then. Wow.
I know. I said.
And I guess, are you unable to get any kind of deferment because you had completed college and you're unmarried and you have no children yet?
Well, no, see, I was back on the primary list during the draft.
Okay.
And I did not want to go in the Army. My brother was in the Air Force, and he seemed happy. So I hurried up and called the recruiter. He came and picked me up, went back to the customs house. And in fact, I was standing there, and the guy looked at me, and he goes, "How bad you want to go in the Air Force?" I said, "Real bad." He goes, "I'm going to lie and say you weigh 138. But don't worry, because you'll weigh that much by you get through basic training." So all of a sudden, now, this is the date. My birthday is November 21st. On November the 22nd, my last day at the Eunice News, I'm standing there. And the little secretary in front came in and said, "I'm going to give you a birthday present and a kiss." And someone ran through the door screaming. And you know what they were screaming? "President Kennedy has just been shot."
Whoa. Right before you were going to get your birthday kiss. That's bad luck. Whoa.
You're right. That's the day I became a man.
They always say everyone remembers that moment when President Kennedy was, when they got the news of it. I feel that way about 9/11 or the Challenger explosion. There are a few moments in life like that. That had to be something. You're growing up like that. So you're now enlisted in the Air Force. Walk us through that if you don't mind, because, I've always been intrigued by your service. As someone who, worked during the Cold War and went off to, I think, Europe, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me, but if you don't mind, please share with us the story of your military service.
Okay. This was the irony. After basic training, there was no I-10 in those days, I-12. A group of us was sent to Keesler Air Force Base for advanced studies. It's so funny. The bus went right through Eunice, which was on Highway 190. And I was looked around. This is where only 8 weeks before I had been really a part of this community. And all of a sudden I had no hair. I still don't now, but anyway, it was just such a strange feeling. I was at Keesler for 6 months, the hardest school in my life. And I thought, sure, I'd be put into.
How so? What do you mean? Is that the physical exertion or some kind of academic angle? Or what do you mean by that?
For the first 8 weeks, it was advanced second basic, which meant 5 days a week we had to run 2 miles in Brogans on an old airstrip.
Oh, yeah, that'll do it.
But anyway, the schooling was very, very hard because it was all electronics. I thought, sure, I would be put into a career field that would involve media. I had a journalism degree. I would have been
the background for it. Mm-hmm.
But of course not. Uncle Sam's going to use you the way he sees fit.
And there's that federal efficiency for you.
Yeah. So I became what they called at the time electronic intercept operator and analysis specialist. And the work that I wound up doing, I'm not going to talk about on the air because I didn't talk about it to my wife for 20 years. But
as I understand that your work was highly classified, so you could not. Yeah, of course.
But anyway, I went from, after Keesler, I went back to Kelly Air Force Base briefly in San Antonio. And then I was assigned to a tiny little base in Trabzon, Turkey. It was beautiful. It was right near, it was about 20 miles from the Russian border on the Black Sea, on a little mountain overlooking the Black Sea. And all around was snow-covered mountains. And I'll never forget the first 2 weeks, I kept thinking, this scenery is beautiful. The little house I lived in Alexandria on North 16th Street. And I just kept thinking, God, this is so beautiful. I'm not looking at that another little house. And guess what?
Wait, and a big upgrade from Tumbleweed, Texas, or wherever you lived in Texas, right?
Right. 3 months later, I would have traded all the scenery to be back sitting on the front porch of that little house on North 16th Street in Alexandria, Louisiana.
Wait, is that because it got cold or because you're eating borscht nonstop around the clock?
Well, first of all, the food was terrible. They couldn't always supply us. There were only about 100 of us there. We had no doctor and no chaplain. They said, don't get sick and don't die because you don't have a doctor or a chaplain.
Wow.
And at the time, the relations were not very good between Turkey and the United States, so we were not allowed to intermingle much. We'd go downtown a little bit, but couldn't eat the local food. And I did not talk to a woman for 15 months. We were not allowed to mingle in any way with women because it was Muslims.
Yeah.
And anyway.
And here you are in your 20s, probably, otherwise born and ready to go. Yeah.
About 22, 23 at the time. So anyway, from there, 17 miles away was Shulinku Air Base in Taiwan. And that was wonderful. Same kind of work against a different country. Taiwan was beautiful also. The people were great in Taiwan. I thoroughly enjoyed the 15 months I spent in Taiwan.
What about the food? How did you adjust to the Asian fare and the Eastern cuisine?
Well, again, first of all, that was a tri-service base. We had Army, Navy, Air Force, and the Navy did the dining.
Oh, so you're getting American chow from the military folks.
Yeah,
okay.
that base was much bigger.
Gotcha.
And that Navy dining hall was really good. It was the best food I had the whole time I was in the Air Force. And you could eat on the street there, but you usually did it after a few beers. Because there could be consequences, and I sure won't go there.
Of course,
but it was a great experience. And then when I got out of there, I went back, and that's when I went to work for the Alexandria Daily Town Talk. Mr. Laborde was the editor, the same man.
The same Mr. Laborde you mentioned earlier that kind of helped steer you to journalism. Gotcha.
Right. And I really enjoyed working for the Town Talk. Working for a daily newspaper is hard work. But it was exciting. It was a sense of accomplishment. I'll never forget the first day I went to work there. I went home and my parents were sitting there and they were waiting. They said, your name's on the front page of the paper by Vic Couvilion. Our son's in the paper. I said, get used to it. Cool. 2 or 3 weeks, it was so commonplace. Every day there'd be 2 or 3 byline stories.
That's neat.
And then
I bet. I bet they were just so proud. I mean, just to see your kid come up and do that. That's really special. What were you writing about back then? What were the type of stories you
I
covered?
was straight news writer then. I could have made a decision to go sports or straight news, and I chose straight news and features.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, for about 7 months, I was on the police beat. I'd get up every morning at 6 o'clock. I'd have to go to the Rapides Parish Sheriff's Office to sit the Alexandria Police Department, Pineville Police Department, whatever. And our deadline was 9:30 because we were a PM paper. Sometimes I'd have to write 4 or 5 stories before 9 o'clock. And then I'd cover any other stories. I covered trials and whatever that needed to be covered. And usually wrote the lead feature for the Sunday special edition we did. Whatever. It didn't matter. Whatever I was told to write, I wrote. And then another coincidence in my life came.
What was that?
Well, I wanted to move out of Alexandria and maybe get into the Baton Rouge area, whatever. And coincidentally, one of my former teachers walked in the newsroom at the Town Talk one day. And I'd had 2 classes under him. By then, he was a public relations man for Northwestern. I told him, I said, I need a job around Baton Rouge somewhere. I have a reason for wanting to go there. He goes, I got a job for you. He said, the news director and the publications director at Southeastern in Hammond needs a news writer.
Mm-hmm.
He said, here's his name and here's the phone number. I thought, let me just see. I called him, and he was from Texas. He was on his way to Texas for vacation. He stopped in Alexandria, met me at a Burger King on MacArthur Drive. I had a portfolio. We talked. He goes, I like you. Come to Hammond, see if you like it. I did, and here I am. I was going to come here for about 2 years.
And what year was that, Mr. Vic? You might have mentioned it, but I missed. What year?
1970.
Oh, wow. So you've been here longer than I have. That's an impressive run.
Yep. So I was single at the time, and I was fortuitous that working in the office where I was Judy Blaze, who grew up behind where Bonings is now.
Right.
In fact, Mr. McNair, the man that hired me, came back to Hammond. He said, I found you a husband. We had no idea. I'd never seen her. She'd never seen me. And about a year and a half later, we were married.
Well, so let's talk about Miss Judy. Your wife is one of my favorite people in the world. She's the best pal and mentor to Paulette Poche, who was like a second mother to me. And that's really my personal introduction to the two of y'all. But she is just so giving and energetic and just fantastic. So tell me more about the meeting. I mean, did you just kind of know right away, or what's the love origin story here? Because
we got to be
coming around.
She was the secretary to Larry Heimel, the legendary athletic sports information director at Southeastern, and I was on the news side. So naturally, we got to be friends in the office. Whatever, we started just palling around and dating, and sure enough, one thing led to another. And another quick thing right here too. One of the reasons why I came here was I thought I knew I still had GI Bill money left, a lot of it, and I hadn't used it yet. And I had the opportunity to work on my master's degree at Southeastern, taking classes at noon and after 5 o'clock. And
who did you study under at Southeastern, Mr. Vic? Who were your professors?
Some legends, people like. Gosh, so many of them. They had a wonderful history department. Mike Kurtz, who was an excellent historian. Roman.
Well, now you're the legend, so it's like you belong in the Hall of Fame, bust area with them. So that's got to be kind of cool.
Roman Helenak and Dr. Romero and others. So I nursed that for 3 years, and they paid me $315 a month, and I got a promotion because I had my master's degree, so it really worked out very, very well. My Air Force time finally paid off in a big way there. But anyway, and Judy and I, in 1971, right after we married, about the time we married, I joined the Hammond Kiwanis Club because I had covered the Kiwanis Club in Pineville when I worked for the Town Talk. And remember who up there was now working. He saw me. He said, "Hey, I used to say, you want to come to Kiwanis Club meeting? I said, yeah. I joined the next week, 55 years ago, and I've been in the Hammond Kiwanis Club since.
Wow, that's amazing. So if you don't mind, I want to jump in here so we can identify the Kiwanis Club for people who don't know. It's an organization that's played a huge role in my life. Literally an hour ago, I was talking to my Kiwanis mentor, Danny Williams, who was our Key Club sponsor, and well, through all of that stuff. But Kiwanis, if you don't mind, just give me Kiwanis 101. What's the Kiwanis Club and why you joined, and tell us a little bit about the good the club does in the community. Then we'll get into some specific projects that you and Miss Judy and others in the club have spearheaded.
Okay, first of all, this is the mission statement. Kiwanis is an international organization of volunteers dedicated to improving the world, one child and one community at a time. And that's what we kind of live by. For example, our signature project is this. This morning, every Thursday, a group of us gather together. We fill 208 bags with 9 easy-to-eat food items for little children. Here's why. We adopted a school, I'm not going to name it, in the poorest section of Hammond. And we said, what can we do for your school? And we did several things for them. Then they came and told us the teachers were taking money out of their pockets, and we know we don't pay our teachers enough.
Amen to that.
And because they were buying crackers and little things, because the little kids were coming in hungry on Monday morning because they had nothing to eat. Mm-hmm. So every week we give them a take-home bag with 10 easy-to-eat items, like Vienna sausage, Pop-Tarts, things like that. Ramen noodles. And we've been doing this now for, I guess, 12, 14 years, and it's wonderfully accepted.
And that's so essential. My wife works at the Ponchatoula Junior High. She's a longtime school counselor, has been there for a few years. And she's often told me about how heartbreaking the poverty is here in Tangipahoa. Many kids show up, hungry. And so, that's a great undertaking. And you guys are just quietly doing that every Thursday morning with no pomp and circumstance or photo ops, just because it's the right thing to do. And that's the mission statement of Kiwanis. That's so neat.
Right. We also have a giant food drive at Christmas. I won't go into the details, but this year we filled 125 huge boxes full of food, and we put a chicken and a loaf of bread in each one of those boxes. Greatly appreciated by many in the community. Another thing we do that's really been rewarding is we sponsor something called the Action Club, AKTION, for adults.
This is a great project. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and we've taken them to LSU's athletic department, the state capitol, to the zoo in New Orleans, and to LIGO, and it has put so much into their lives. First time they met, they had no idea how to conduct a meeting. Now they know how to do it. It's just been really rewarding. We've helped out at the Council on Aging over the years, built bookshelves for them, awnings, whatever the needs were, we've done. When there's a need, if we can fill it, we try to fill it.
Yeah, and what I love too that you do, Mr. Vic, is the Kiwanis Club through things like the Key Club at the high school level and the Builders Club at the junior high level. And there's another one at college. I forget the name of.
K clubs.
Thank you.
Okay.
But you inspire service in young people. For example, Mr. Danny Williams in the Key Club that he ran at Ponchatoula High School in the 90s, resulted in me personally putting in 500 hours of community service my senior year. Now, I'm here to tell you, there's no way on earth Parker Layrisson gets up out of bed on Saturday mornings and picks up trash through Adopt a Highway or visits old people, at Christmas to sing carols and all that. But the Key Club, through the Kiwanis, with the sponsorship of the Kiwanis, made that possible. And then when you get people starting at an early age doing that, it just becomes natural when they get old enough to become a Kiwani and they join. And so I've seen, my brother's been a former president of the Ponchatoula Kiwanis Club, but I've seen Bree, our mayor, Wesley Daniels, so many others, Kevin, our assessor, and many, many, many more just naturally kind of acclimate to the Kiwanis Club and do the kind of things that you talked about. So thank you for inspiring that next generation. If you don't mind, Mr. Vic, I want to share with you a comment that's come in from a mutual friend of ours. the great Brett Duncan of Hammond. Brett, hello. Brett's not only an attorney like me, he's also invested his time in public service through the school board for many, many years.
Yep.
Mr. Vic, what Brett has to say about you is you are an absolute legend for so many reasons. And of course, I agree. He says only your wife ranks higher.
And he's right. He's correct.
Yeah. Amen to that. Well, let me ask you this, Mr. Vic. I'm sure it makes you, it's got to be flattering to hear that because one, it's true, and it's true, although you're too humble to probably admit it. But two, it's coming from a community leader like Brett, who selflessly invests in the community, whether it's as a legal advocate for children or school board, many times president and still member. But when I ask you, like, what lessons have you learned through your volunteerism, through your career? Because one of the things I know we're almost out of time, but I would not be doing my duty to our viewers and our listeners if I let the moment pass without asking you, what have you learned? What could you share with the Vic of tomorrow? Whether it's, someone who wants to be a journalist like you or somebody who just wants to be a good human being who's investing in our community and making it a better place, as you and Miss Judy are doing. What are the lessons you've learned that you could share?
Well, first of all, on this community service side, let me say this. My parents didn't have a whole lot. And what they had to give to us basically, but they were also active in their own way in many ways. It didn't matter. It seemed like always when there was a holiday, there was someone in the neighborhood who didn't have much, but they would be at the table. Mama and Daddy would make sure that they were there, whatever. They were active in St. Rita's Catholic Church at every level. And to me, it was just natural that you try to help other people. And Kiwanis led me to that. And Judy joined Kiwanis because of me, and she is the driving force in our club. She is into everything there. And besides that, every Wednesday when she heard at a program at Kiwanis, there was a need for delivering meals to the homebound. She volunteered to do that. She's been doing that for more than 20 years now. We found out last year the need of a local family. I'm not going to name them or their origins, who desperately needed help. We bring them food from time to time. The neighbor has kids that are growing up. They had surplus toys and clothes. We bring them that. Any way she can help anybody. Another thing we do, and the end part of it's Kiwanis, is the shoebox ministry.
Yes, I love that.
150 boxes in appropriate age groups. She works all year long gathering this stuff to fill those boxes. It is remarkable. And we bring them to the River Church over here by Hammond High.
Mm-hmm. Such a great program. Yeah.
Oh, I know. They load an 18-wheeler with them just in this community.
Yeah. That's fantastic. But, you and Miss Judy have done so much. And I love how you identify her as the driving force in the club, because she is. And any Kiwanian of Hammond, young or old, would certainly agree. But for me, the longevity you guys have been able to put into that club is remarkable, because I remember distinctly 30 plus years ago when I was in the Key Club, my pal Will and I were officers. I was the president and he was the senior class representative. And we were kind of proud that his mom's friends, the Couvillions, were bigwigs with the nearby Hammond, Kiwanis Club. We'd see you at conventions and whatnot. But y'all were kind of running the show, if formally or informally or otherwise back then. And here we are 30 years later, and I come to speak to the club a year or two ago, and it's just like the good old days when the president's giving their report. They're like, "All right, Miss Judy, what are we doing this week? What should we be up to?" And she's kind of, the power behind the power. She stands up and does the same thing she did in 1995 when I was a kid. So it's just cool.
I'm going to interrupt you. I know we're running out of time, but I've got a story to tell. You mentioned Will Richardson. You mentioned Will Richardson. I've got to tell this story. When you and Will were apparently still in high school, I had an old Chevrolet truck. And we were remember it well, where Paulette Richardson lived with her sons and behind that old house. Y'all said, "Can we drive your truck to the back?" I think y'all were making wreaths out of vines or something. And y'all stuck my truck.
Wait. And great minds think alike. Miss Judy just chimed in with a comment here. It says, we remember when you and Will got the tractor stuck in the field at Paulette's house. Well, we did, but that's a great example because you were so good to those Richardson boys. I mean, growing up, none of us had the kind of resources we have now. But when they had some lean times, you and Miss Judy, stepped up, whether it was teaching them how to drive or letting us borrow that old truck you mentioned. We were running our little blueberry and peach farm in the summer. And I mean, y'all were just always there for us. And I want to say thank you. I want to tell you how much, I was just a friend and kind of one step removed, but I was there quite often. And I'm sure Will would echo this, but it meant a lot to me to see people standing in the gap for my best friend. And now both Richardson boys are the godfathers to my son, Will to my older boy, Luke, and Ben to his brother, Ben, to my younger son, James. And you won't find two better dads in the world than the two Richardson guys. And they learned so much from you, Mr. Vic, and you didn't have to. Those weren't your kids. And Miss Judy makes a great comment here I'll share with you, and then I'll give you the last word. But it says, Vic and I were not fortunate enough to have our children of our own, but in our hearts, we were parents to many, many children. And you do as much as you can to help others. And amen, Miss Judy. That's exactly, you said it much more eloquently than I did. But that was the feeling. You guys were constantly giving into kids, whether it was folks you knew a lot, like Will and Ben Richardson, or their pals, or just some kids you never would meet, like these folks that you're feeding every Thursday. So on behalf of my friends, myself, and our community, I just want to say thanks, and I want to recognize that. And Mr. Vic, what would you add to that? What comes to mind when you read Miss Judy's comment there?
Well, we say this all the time. I don't know what we would do if we were not doing stuff for the community. Our life would be empty. If you're not doing things like that, and especially if you're retired and you have the time to do things in the community and you're not doing it, what do you do with your time? How much TV can you watch? There's not a whole lot to learn on television.
Yeah.
Newton Menoff 100 years ago called it a wasteland, and he's pretty accurate. I don't know what we would do if we did not devote our time to these things.
Amen. Give up the Netflix subscription and get out here in your community and do good like Mr. Vic's doing. Mr. Vic, one thing I wanted to ask you about and didn't get a chance to, so I'll briefly bring up, I'm reminded by a comment here by my old babysitter, Lori Agnew-Hess. Hey, Lori, a wonderful woman in her own right. She says, Mr. Vic, that you were one of her favorite all-time professors at Southeastern, and you were her yearbook advisor. She says that you and Miss Judy are a blessing and an inspiration for so many, and you're the gems of Tangipahoa Parish. Laurie, thank you for saying that. That's amazing.
Thank you, Laurie.
Mr. Vic, if you don't mind, tell us about your teaching career and what it meant to be an educator at Southeastern, where you got your own master's degree.
Well, this is funny. I was hired as a news writer for Southeastern, and my office was right by the Le Souvenir, the yearbook office, and I started helping them some too, because unlike the daily newspaper, there was a lot. It was so much easier at Southeastern. But anyway, we had a journalism teacher named Dewey Dingledine. He was editor of the Daily Star, and he left.
Was that his real name? Or is that
his real name? I'll never forget it.
Name. Okay.
Dewey Dingledine. He left to go to a newspaper in Oklahoma, and the vice president at the time came and put a note on my desk. He said, "You will temporarily assume the teaching duties of Mr. Dingledine." For the next 28 years, I taught on a little piece of paper. And then this is what was funny. I retired. Finally, they let me retire. Mm-hmm. And I had taught numerous journalism classes over all those years. About 6 weeks later, the phone rings, and it's the principal at St. Thomas Aquinas High School. She said, "I don't know who you are." She was a nun. She said, "I don't know who you are, but somebody gave me your name. My journalism teacher is going to be out for 2 weeks with surgery. Would you sub?" I said, "Why not? What's 2 weeks?" 3 years later, I was still at St. Thomas Aquinas. They wouldn't let me leave. So I adopted a whole new generation of students that I still see around town now.
Yeah.
And then when I retired, I started off writing part-time for the Advocate. Again, one of those life's coincidences. The area editor at the time walked in the office. He said, "I'm looking for a good student, for a student who writes well, who could cover a few stories a week for us from this area." I said, "I'm retiring. Would you give me a chance?" "Oh, yeah, I'll give you a chance." Unfortunately, a year ago right now, illness has ended my journalism career that was sick by then. It stretched back to 1962.
Wow.
So I wrote for The Advocate at least 8 or 10 stories a month, byline stories again,
That's
from the
amazing.
year 2000 until 2025.
So that went over 20 years. But you know what?
Right.
I got to go back and defend Dewey. Was it Dingledine?
Yeah.
He was right. I mean, he said temporary. 28 years is temporary. It's just long term.
Yeah.
He promised you be a short term teacher. That's just fantastic. And you know, how much better is journalism? You know, just in our entire area, not just because of the example you set by writing well and letting everyone read it, but by teaching the journalists of tomorrow. I mean, Southeastern, we now have the Robin Roberts Center there. We've got one of the most prominent journalists in the country through her. And you know, we have Randy Russo, who went to school with my little brother at Ponchatoula High now in the New Orleans television news, and many print journalists. And you play such a critical role in that. You know, it's such a beautiful tapestry of journalists there. So thank you for that contribution. Mr. Vic, I've gone over. I want to thank you for your patience. I'm 10 minutes over the time I promised you. Miss Judy, if you're still watching, I apologize for keeping your hubby longer than I said I would. But of course, we could do this all day, all week, and we wouldn't cover all your stories. So before we go and let you get back to Miss Judy and let our viewers get back to their evenings, what else is on your mind, on your heart, or just anything at all you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners before you go?
First of all, that we live in troubled times. That the world is changing. It's changing fast. What I encourage people to do is, and I guess I'm an old man. I'm 84 years old. I yearn to go back to the times when you felt safe in your neighborhoods. Growing up, my brother and I would ride bicycles all over Alexandria, never worried about a thing.
Yeah.
I want people to learn how to get along. Our society has become so partisan. It's my party's right, yours is wrong. There's no middle ground. We can't get along together. I want people to get together again. I want our world to be safe again. I want people to go back to church again. And I know this may be asking too much. I know the world's always changed and it'll never be perfect. But that's what, in my heart of hearts, I want people to learn to talk to on the street, to say, hello, how are you today? You know? And
well, all of that would make it better. It's never been perfect. It'll never be perfect, but it will be better if just some of what you just said happens. And I think anybody who's listening or watching can do our part to make it better. You know, we could join the Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club. You know, we can volunteer with TARC or any of the million other options, all the great programs around here. We can get our butt in a pew on Sunday when we'd rather be snoozing and watching football. And there's no better example in our community than you, and especially Miss Judy. So I want to close with her comment. As usual, she gets the last word, Mr. Vic. But Miss Judy's got another comment here, and she says, thanks so much. Vic has so many wonderful stories, and of course he does. Both of you do. So let me just tell the two of you, I don't usually say this on the show, but Mr. Vic, Miss Judy, I love you. Y'all have played a huge part in my life. I want to correct you. I'm a little awkward in doing this, but you're wrong about one thing, Mr. Vic. You're 84, but that's not old. That can't be old because my daddy's 84, and I refuse to believe that he's old. So continue to make the best with the many years that I hope you guys have left. And to our viewers that have stuck with us to the end here, I want to say thank you. And we'll see y'all next week. Y'all take care. Once again,